Good morning. Welcome to episode 2 of our Failures Not an Option 100 Days webinar. So last week, I got my checklist, so I remember what we did last week.
Yes, you do.
It's been a long time since last week. We started off our series. This is a 100-day webinar, and the idea is you're 100 days on the job. We want you to be a lot more secured at the end of that 100 days than you were at the beginning, without killing yourself and doing too much worse work, but also not tanking your approval rating, so making sure your users are happy. And last week we started off with some nice and easy things, especially if you're already a ThreatLocker customer, because you can skip the hardest parts of it. And the first goal was to identify a test group. For those who didn't do that, you've got to keep up, got to catch up, make the test group yourselves if you're in the IT department. One of the things I find about IT departments is they are the worst users of all.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but the main thing about the test group is making sure that you have all of the software and applications in that group that you're going to hit across the organization, especially if it's mission critical. We wanted to deploy a ThreatLocker agent or find another way of monitoring file activity, because what we want to do today is go through some of that file activity and look for certain things, and also monitor elevations on the machine, executions, and network activity. So we needed some kind of agent to monitor all of those. We wanted to do one tangible thing last week, which was to set the password protected screensaver. So I wonder, should we, you know what we can do? If you had, and only for the next 60 seconds, if you had a gotcha when you did this, because our gotcha when we did this was it locked our monitors in the lobby.
Yes.
So
Did anyone screw themselves over, basically?
Yeah, so because it's really useful to know what you might forget when you're doing these type of things. So if you had something that when you set that policy, a screen locked that you didn't think about was going to lock and it upset somebody, maybe share that in the Q&A. Or can we share in the
And
chat?
just, can we say, the funnier the better?
The funnier the better,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, okay.
No gotchas so far.
No gotcha so far. Okay, well, that's good news. The only gotcha I could think of was those public monitors, so hopefully we addressed it last week. But if anyone did have a gotcha, hopefully everyone did that last week. It was one small change, whether it be through Active Directory, whether it be through ThreatLocker. It wasn't a great change, but it does make a big impact. So hopefully everyone turned on their lock policies, at least on their test computers. Buying donuts, I don't know how many people did that. No one bought me donuts.
No.
So
There's been a distinct lack of donuts in the office over the last few days.
And turning off Windows keylogger as well on those test groups, I think, was another one we did.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there being too many gotcha, or not called keylogger. What was it called?
Oh, something fluffy and warm. Getting to know you,
Getting to know you.
I think.
That's what the NSA call it too.
Yes.
Okay, so we wanted to identify apps as a local admin, so we deployed the agent, and we're going to go through how to do that now. Start monitoring USB storage, which if you deploy the ThreatLocker agent, it's going to start doing that right out of the box. Document the local admin accounts and when they were last used, and do a port scan of the outside of your firewall. Now, another interesting one, did anyone find any funky ports? So if you found anything open that you didn't expect to find open, let us know, because sometimes people don't realize that their firewall has an admin interface on.
I'd be really interested to know if anybody found anything.
Yes, so please share. I don't think anyone's going to admit it if they did, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Okay, so this week, just remembering the initial concept, we want to focus on how do we secure the environment without upsetting the user. So what we're going to do first is we're going to focus on what's been cataloging over the last week. Now, if you're using a different endpoint solution, you can follow through hopefully with that. But I'm going to show you how that works in ThreatLocker. I'm going to show you how we're going to look, the data we're going to look for, and what we're going to do with that data. So if I can share my screen here. And that worked first time.
I think we've got a nerd answer here.
Go on.
I found an open thermal exhaust port.
Thermal exhaust port.
Yes. Now, I thought that was one thing when I read it, but I actually think it's a Star Wars reference. Yay! Go! Look at me go! Look at me go!
You know more about Star Wars.
I can nerd too.
You think it was a Star Wars.
And we've got all the other nerves are piping up with, is it the size of a womp bat? Thank you, Star Wars nerds.
Nerds on this webinar.
Yeah, who would have thunk it?
Okay, so here, if we're using ThreatLocker, if you just deployed the agent last week, your machine should all be monitoring and in a nice monitoring state. You should start logging data in the Unified Audit. Now, for those who've been using us for a long time, especially if you've got lots of rows, you notice how much faster this Unified Audit got in the last month. when I say we completely rebuilt every way we store data, I'm not exaggerating. I have about $2 million of servers that were decommissioned because we had to run both sets parallel for a long time. And there is a lot of data. But what's more important is this has got really, really fast and lots of options. What I want to focus on first is what we can do in here, because this is the data that allows us to make good decisions without upsetting our users. And in the unified audit here, we have a bunch of filters. So we have filters like, was something denied? We have action type filters like, was it network traffic? Was it a delete? Was it a move? Was it a write? We have group bys, which is a new feature that was added, so we can get counts of those instances. We have computer names if we want to search individual computers, or assets. You'll notice it's renamed to, because we're starting to log your Office 365 data as well. And we have a generic search box here. This kind of searches pretty much every parameter in the system. This is where we can get really advanced. So we want to know what programs are running as a local admin. We want to know what USB drives are being used in the organization. We want to know what open ports are there. So what we're going to do is show you how to find some of these things, and then we're going to show you how you can make good policy decisions based on it. So first thing I'm going to look at is what's on my next slide, USB policies. So the first thing I'm going to look at is USB policies, because I want to know, did anyone use USB policies in my organization? So what you're going to do here is you're going to go into the unified audit, you're going to click on this advanced filter, and you're going to search for interface. And when we search for interface, we're going to say equals, and it's very, very simple, USB. Now, I'm going to search for this, and this will show you all of the USB traffic in my environment. Obviously, I've already locked down, so I've got some denies. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add another filter to say encryption. Actually, I can look at this screen. I just realized that. Encryption status equals not encrypted. And I will say there's a small issue in this. Should be a drop down, but it's not encrypted. Now, useful note, you can actually search across child organizations. So if you have multiple orgs, you can search across child organizations. So you don't have to switch here. And I can just literally go off and hit search. The other thing that's useful is if I click on this drop down, I can save it. So I can see my search here, and I can say
not
USB,
USBs.
USB not encrypted, and I hit save on that. So then I have that for historic use. I guess I have to refresh that drop down. Apparently not. There you go. Okay, I'm going to change my encryption status to not equals encrypted. I'm going to go and look at that as well. And you can literally see everything that's accessed from a USB drive. You can see what program on it. Now, the program is really useful, because if you have a USB drive just plugged in and you've got an AV scanner that's just scanning it, you want to know, is this actually being used by the user or isn't it being used? So very easy to find out. You can click on the program. A couple of group by features that are useful. If you don't want to go to all of your employees, you can group by username here, and this will show you all of the usernames that accessed it. So I just have ZTW user and system are the only two users in my system. So I don't have to go around every user saying, why are you using USB drives? And then when we do want to see exactly what that user did, we can just either remove it and search by the actual username themselves. So let me just uncheck that group by, hit search. I'll see everything, and I can see everything they ran. So if there is something suspicious, it's going to be much easier to find.
Pretty evident.
Okay, so the next thing I want to look at in here, and I'm going to show you what to do with that data in a moment, is, well, actually, let's show you what to do with it now, how to handle a USB drive. So we've got a situation here that most of the company is not using USB, just one user. So we have a few different options on how we address this. The first thing is we can go to the user and we can say, give me my donuts back. You've been using the USB drive. And you need to stop using USB drives if that's acceptable. If it's not acceptable, the next thing we can do is start creating policies based on the user's behavior. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create various different policies in the USB drive section here. So if I go into the storage control section of ThreatLocker, and again, you can do this in Windows under group policy as well. This group policy only allows you to turn it on or off, so you don't get...
It's like a light switch. There's not much granularity to it.
But there are plenty of... I would say this is the one feature that you probably have 10 times over if you have multiple agents on your machine. But in our case, I'm going to create a policy that just blocks access to USB drive. So I'm going to say is block USB drive access. And it's very, very simple. So I say, I want to turn the policy on. I want to allow all users and groups this applies to. You should check your guinea pig organization if you've got your test users and your guinea pig. I'm going to say read and write, and then I'm going to switch that to deny. And basically, I want to do one more thing, and this is very, very important. Don't forget this part. Selected interface. Okay, so if I click here, I can click selected interface, and I can click USB. And you'll notice we have other options here like DVDs, UNCs, and as we get on, we're going to start talking about blocking untrusted UNCs because that was a big issue in 2020. If you remember the Zune vulnerability that would connect to a UNC, and it would allow you to steal credentials or at least hashes of credentials. So that's going to be important in the future. But for now, I'm just going to say deny USB, and I'm going to check this box. This is an option to allow the user to request permission. Now, we're going to want you to do this on your test group if you don't have users using USBs this week. So at very least on your test group, it's going to be homework. So make sure you create a new policy, turn it on here, make sure there's nothing being blocked you don't want first, and that will block it. Now, if I want to get more granular, so let's just say I want to allow all USBs, but I want to block encrypted USBs, I could do this. I could change this policy to literally just say
encrypted only.
If I can
3 up. I'd just like to say how satisfying it is to see you struggle with trying to type things on your keyboard and move your mouse with a microphone in front of your face.
What does it say at the top of your t-shirt, Rob? Yeah, it just says
failure. I don't know if can people see this.
No,
what does it say in the back of my laptop? That's a shame. We'll go back.
You're
look at that shine. Do it. Sorry. Sorry, Skylar, and I think this is actually a dig at you, Danny, so I'm going to read it out immediately. But Skylar has said, does ThreatLocker help expose layer 8 issues? I didn't know what a layer 8 issue was. Apparently, it's
you didn't know what a layer 8 issue was?
No, I know a PEBCAC.
All issues are layer 8.
Yeah, well, apparently, Skylar thinks that your struggles there were layer 8 issues.
Oh, always. So if we go back to here anyway, we can I can say not encrypted is actually the correct answer. Not encrypted only because we're doing a block policy. And what this policy will do is essentially say I'm going to block all USB drives, whether encrypted or not. Now, a couple of things to note. Policies, this will be changing in the future, run at order. They run global groups first. If you've got multi-tenants, they run global workstations or global servers if you've got a second group. But then the organization policies run. So this is going to run for the whole organization. Then the computer policies run, and then the computer group policies run last. Now, I just put this in the entire organization, and I'm going to change it. And the reason I'm going to change it is because if I have this at the entire org, I can't override it at the computer or computer group. So I'm going to change it down to the workstations, hit save. And now when I click on my workstations here, we'll see my block policy is here. And there are also policies here that you can turn on. So I've got a policy here that already blocks USB workstations for write access there. So you could also decide just to block write access to USB. But in this case, we've got to deny USB and allow the user to request permission. And if I click on that, literally, this is how easy it is. I deploy policies. We've got win number 1.
So Chris has asked, I missed week 1, so perhaps this question is answered in week 1 webinar, but is there a 101-day trial of ThreatLocker to be able to follow this 100 days project?
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
That depends how so there is a trial of ThreatLocker to follow the project, and you can just go to. We didn't necessarily say a 100-day trial, but you could. There's definitely a trial, and it will extend out enough for you to know exactly
how awesome it is.
Because what's going to happen if you didn't attend week 1 is right now we're focusing on test groups, but by the time we get through test groups towards probably week 3 and 4, we're going to start deploying to a larger group. And at that point, you want to be set in on what you're using from a tool point of view. But there's definitely a trial for you to use. It's a nice, and they can extend it out probably 60 days.
Yeah. Ask whoever you're dealing with nicely and just tell them Danny said it's cool.
So I just plugged in. So here's what's happened. And it was a layer 8 issue. I set the policy to be encrypted devices only or unencrypted devices. And this is not an encrypted device. So now when I click on this, I get a Windows message. I can't hit continue. And I also get, if you didn't notice it, pop up in the bottom right corner, a ThreatLocker message, which is going to show me up. There you go, a ThreatLocker message. Now, this is really useful because you can just request access. And when you hit request, type a message in, send the request, and then your admin can approve that in about 60 seconds or so. So if I go back into here, I can see I've got too many things going on here. I can see the user request for that USB drive. See the serial number, and I can permit by specific serial number. So that's how we create a policy. Now I want to create a bit more of an advanced policy. So let's just say I've got a marketing department that need to copy PowerPoints onto USB, because every time we did 850 trade shows last year, and I think we did probably 200 speaking engagements, and there's various PowerPoints being sent around. So they need to be able to copy PowerPoint to USB, and they get really frustrated when they're on site and they're trying to download that 60 megabyte presentation that was just created. But I don't want them to be able to copy bad things on or other things onto USB. I want them to be able to restrict it. So we can actually get much more granular. So when we permit those USB drives, I can do that directly from the response center here. And I can say permit by serial number. And very, very simple. I just say permit for one computer or permit for all computers based on the serial number. And I'm going to say just the group of computers. So I'll say workstations. What am I missing? I've got to give it a name.
Dustin's just asked a question. We can show him this in a minute, but at the very top, where did you set the don't play games for the org?
Okay, I think I have to actually acknowledge this as well, because that's why. So this here is a note. It's really useful, actually. You can put them on computers or you can put them on orgs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a special user that's very, very sensitive, you can go into here and you can say, hey, on approval requests, put a information. Now, information means they don't have to acknowledge it. Warning or severe means they have to acknowledge it. You can set it at the org level, or you can set it at the note level. You can set it temporarily. And it means whenever somebody goes to approve something, it's going to give them that message until they actually accept the approval.
I'm actually kind of disappointed that I didn't hack into your Culti Global earlier and set Rob is the best as the note across the top. Damn it.
It's going to take more than a note, Rob. So, okay, so here I've created my USB drive, I've approved it, and when I go into my policies here, so if I go back into storage control and policies, the user gets a nice pop-up saying you can now run your USB drive. You'll notice I approved that, I think, because I went back in. Did I do it at the group level? No, I did it at the computer level, which is the default, which I've forgotten what it is. And I can see my policy. Now, let's just say this is my marketing department. I'm very worried about them using this to steal data. I can actually go in here and I can limit what they can do on it. So I can say read and write, and I can even say paths. So I'm going to say PPTX because they're only allowed to use PowerPoint, and I'm going to hit save. And that means they won't be able to copy anything to this drive except PowerPoint files, which is a really nice win because we're limited. Now, because we also have a lot of stuff on PowerPoint, I want to get into the next thing we can do, because our goal is here to be as restrictive as possible without upsetting the user. So I'm actually going to go into ThreatLocker Detect, and I'm going to set another policy. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to go into the storage because I want to preset a policy. And these are in community, but I want to show you how to do it from the beginning. So I'm going to say block USB. USB response policy. And I'm not going to enable this policy. So basically, I'm going to set this at the entire org level. And I'm going to say I want to block all read and write to USB, and I don't want to give the user the option to request, because I'm going to hit there. I thought I'd turn that off. Oh, I did. It's disabled. So if I set my entire org. So I see it's there. It's disabled. This is doing nothing right now, this policy. The next thing I want to do is actually create a detect policy and you'll notice there's a bunch of cool reports now in detect. We have the detect scheduled reports as well that appeared, not to go off topic. But I'm going to go into here and I'm going to create a detect policy. Now, what I want to do is say limit USB access to 10 files per hour. I'm going to go down to here. I'm going to create some conditions. So I'm going to first say my action type is write, because I want to limit what people can copy to the USB. I'm going to say write. My second condition I'm going to do is USB. Oh, sorry, not USB. It's interface. Am I spelling that wrong? What else would it be other than interface? called device type. Device type. I don't know why it's different. Matches. And we'll say USB. And my third. So basically, this says if the action is right and the device type is USB, and then I'm going to add a third condition called occurrences. And I'm going to say is greater than 10 in 60 minutes. I could have done 1 hour as well. Now, what I'm going to do, this is set by itself is going to do nothing. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say send an alert because I want to know this happened. Maybe just create alert. And I'm going to send a warning, not put any threat level. This is useful if you want to combine things together to auto-isolate machines. In this case, I'm just going to say send alert. Someone is using USB. We can use variables in here. It really isn't necessary because you get all of the details in the alert anyway of what triggered it, but you could put things like the file name in here if you wanted to get the triggering alert. So, but again, we get all of the details in the alert anyway, so not really necessary. And then I'm going to add a second action because I don't want to just get an alert. I want to make sure that they get stopped because I don't work all night. Well, maybe sometimes. I'm going to create, the second thing I'm going to do is enable storage policy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my storage policy, which was block USB response policy. And then hit save. So what's going to happen here is if I copy more than 50 files to that USB drive, two things are going to happen. One is I'm going to get an alert. And if I clear that alert, the alert gets squashed, everything's good, and the user will be able to use the USB again, at least for another 10 files.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is it's going to automatically enable a storage policy. Now, this is a useful alert, not just on USB, but you can also set up storage network policies to say if someone writes more than 200 files on my network to automatically shut them down, things like that. And if you're not sure if this is going to block too much to begin with, you can just set it up to create an alert and not actually enable a policy. Then later on, you can, if you haven't had any alerts, you can change it to enable a policy, which is a really good way of limiting USB access beyond.
One could describe it as detection and response.
Yes, that's what it is. Detection and automated response.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the alert, so then the human can look at it and say, okay, I can clear this now, or I'm not going to clear it. And as long as, until you clear that alert, that block is going to stay in place. The user will no longer be able to copy files to USB. You could do the same thing without using an interface type of USB. You could just remove that. And if someone wrote, you probably wouldn't want to do 10 files. If someone wrote 200 files, you could automatically block their writes, which is great for ransomware. Better to stop ransomware running in the first place. So,
I mean, well, sorry. First of all, we do have a bunch of questions on this subject, but I mean, I suppose I would hope it's fairly self-explanatory as to why you want to be blocking USB drives. I mean, quite simply, it's the easiest way to exfiltrate data from an organization.
And I think one of the problems, and we're going to talk about more data exfiltration as we go further on in the webinar. One of the problems people often have is they are 100% trust their team. There's going to be bad people there who do bad things.
Scalable.
It's not scalable. So just putting controls in place, but also make it difficult for anyone else that impersonates them, gets access to the laptop. So if someone, if my CFO leaves his laptop in a conference room and forgets to lock it, make it hard for someone to copy files off that laptop. Make it difficult.
I saw a really interesting study, and I know the whole most statistics are made up, but it was something like 55 or 56% of
I
people,
thought all 70%,
when leaving an organization, will take some sort of sensitive information with them. And I'm one of those people. So when I left my previous job,
careful, Rob,
to join, no, they know it's cool. Well, let me finish. So when I left my previous job to join ThreatLocker, I took my contact list because I wanted to stay in touch with people. Now the company knew about it; they were cool, but you know, maybe they wouldn't have been, or maybe they didn't. And it's just a really easy way for people to take information they shouldn't be able to take away.
So it also helps, like I said, if you leave your laptop somewhere, if an attacker's copying things, gets access to one of your machines, it makes everything harder for an attacker.
Right, we've got a bunch of questions here. So when you block USB drives, does this affect any other devices like iSCSI or any devices like keyboards, cameras, mobile devices with USB interface?
And that is $1 million question. So it depends on the.
Well, keyboards, cameras. Cameras probably, yeah, because they show up as storage.
Yeah, so the cameras, absolutely. So what you're actually doing is you're saying the USB interface. Where this gets a little bit complicated, and there are other options for the types of drives in that list other than USB, is sometimes card readers don't show up as USB interface because USB-C is technically could have a hard drive, it can display monitors, so they'll present themselves as a different type of interface. So you've got to be super careful with these things. There are other interfaces in the list there, and one of the cool things you can do is look at what storage people are writing in the Unified Audit, and that's one of the nice things about this file audit is it's not just USB, but it's also network shares, documents. If someone's moving, if a user copies a file from one or drags a whole folder from one place to another by mistake, then you're going to be able to see that in the Unified Audit. And we show literally all reads and writes on your entire system.
One thing we should probably mention to people when they are playing around with storage control policies is the whole storage and learning thing. So I'm going to create some storage control policies here. My machines are in learning mode. Nothing's going to happen, right?
Yes, actually. So there's two types of learning mode, which is a new thing, which I actually only saw for the first time today. When you're in learning mode, you actually have the option of saying storage learning, but I generally don't like doing that because what that does, this basically says all of my storage policies are not going to be blocked. I think a much better way of doing this is to put a USB policy in place, and there's actually one by default. It's just on permit. So if we go into storage control here, we go into our workstations. We say, okay, USB workstations. I'm going to copy that policy, and I would actually say leave. This is in place by default when you install it. It's in permit mode, so mine's in deny, but let's just say this was in permit mode. After a few weeks of doing that, going to the Unified Audit, search by the policy name. Again, we can do this in here. We can just say policy name equals this, and we can see everything that hit this policy in the organization. If it was, obviously I'm in deny mode, but it would show permit. Then you can say, okay, I now want to go into here. I want to click on the policy because there's nothing that I didn't want to hit, and I'm going to switch it to deny. So it's very easy to do that. You can also put it in storage learning mode or storage monitor mode, but that's not. Just to be clear, if you've got application learning mode and create a deny storage policy, it will deny access to those storage.
Okay, so we got a bunch more. Can you restrict read but not write? So engineers can create a USB key but not introduce something on their own company device. Read but not write.
You can't restrict read but not write, but you could block file types. And the reason being is because when you open a file in Windows, there's a hierarchy on what it is. So you have read permission, you have write permission. Write includes read. So technically we could actually say if it's a read, we're not going to allow it. The problem is you wouldn't even be able to copy the file there, and sometimes it requests a read before it requests a write, and you'd end up blocking that write access as well.
I've already answered this, but can we force them to encrypt the USB drives before use?
Yes.
I said yes, permit encrypted, deny not encrypted.
And then they can just use BitLocker. One of the cool new features actually we're adding this year is the ability to choose certain hardware vendors as well. So if you're using Kingston or some kind of vendor, you can specify this vendor's allowed, but you can say if it's BitLocker encrypted, it's allowed. If it's not allowed.
You're going to like this one. Can you allow a single user or a group of users to use USB drives on all computers? For instance, the field tech team is allowed to use encrypted devices on all workstations.
Yes, absolutely. Now, bear in mind, if they're not logged in as the user, it's not going to help them, but you can go into storage control here. You can create a policy, and inside the policy, you have a whole bunch of options on these policies. One of the options is users and groups. I'll see it here somewhere. There, users and groups. And if I've got, I don't even need to use a sync tool. You can sync with Active Directory, but you can just type in a DN for Active Directory here, and it'll work from an Active Directory. You can type in an Active Directory username. If you're using Azure users, you can sync your Azure groups as well, and just add a group in there from Azure Sync, which is really useful.
Dwight has asked, is it possible to do a USB policy in a network that does not have access to the internet? I'm guessing the answer is no. This USB demo is exactly what they are looking for.
Okay, so yes, you can block USBs. We actually service a lot of cruise ships, it's still blocked. And what will happen is it will queue the logs, and when it comes online, if it ever comes online, it will send the logs up to ThreatLocker and say, here's the logs. You'd have to have network access initially to get your policy, but after you've got your policy, it stays in place completely offline.
Yeah, stored locally. Pierre has asked, I presume this is about the detect policy. What is request monitoring?
Request monitoring means it can be monitored by our MDR. So if you're using our MDR service, you can say, hey, I want you to monitor this policy. It's a request. Basically, we will only monitor policy that doesn't have high false positive rate. So if you put a policy in place that triggers every day, we're just going to say, no, we're not monitoring that for you because, and then you request it. What we'd do is we'd monitor it for a while to see if it's got any false triggers. If it's got too many false triggers, we'll refuse to monitor it. If it's a legitimate detection policy, we'll add it into the monitoring. And you'll get one more question before we move on to the next section because we've got to get through 100 days of...
One more question. Oh, my God. Okay, you carry on. Does ThreatLocker also interface with Office 365 to stop download/copy of data from that to another cloud resource like personal OneDrive or Dropbox?
Okay, so we integrate with Office 365 from a logging, so we'll also log all of your OneDrive files in the Unified Audit here. It's great to actually go in and put the Office 365 connector on to pull your OneDrive logs in. We can stop you, and we do this with detect. Essentially, you do it two ways. We can stop the browser uploading files. So you could say, on the browser, you cannot upload files to the internet and what you do is full stop. Or you could say you're not allowed to upload files to the internet if you've gone to box.net. What you do in that case is you'd put a previously matched policy. So in that condition, and what's cool about these conditions is you can kind of do anything you want. So if we go into detect here and go into my policies, I'd put so this one here is automatically block data exfiltration. So this one says, hey, if the action types read the occurrence is greater than 20 and it's Edge or Firefox, just because I've done it there, create an alert. But you could also say I'm going to add a second condition, which is previously matched policy. And you can actually hit a network or web control policy or any other policy to say, hey, they went to a cloud storage device, and now the browser is not allowed to access those files.
Just one thing to explain. So somebody has asked, or Janir has asked, how do you allow for USB webcams? So I think it's important just to explain the difference between USB storage and USB.
Yes. So, and rubber duckies are the best way to explain them because they're also keyboards. But we're controlling access to USB storage. So USB webcam will work as per usual. If you need a special driver for it or special software, it will be blocked by the application control and you'd have to permit that. But if it's just built-in Windows drivers, it wouldn't be blocked unless you explicitly decided to block that driver from running.
Okay. That's my one question.
Let's move on to the next part then. Okay, so next we are going to talk about a little bit about the applications that learn. We're not going to dive too much into this today because what will happen is you're going to dig yourself into a hole and you're going to start getting heartburn. But if you deployed ThreatLocker last week, you're going to start noticing on the application page here. So if I bring this up, we're going to start seeing applications that are found on our computer. And one of the things you'll see is you'll notice tags against them. So I'm going to zoom this out a little bit because I'm already on 80%. The resolution is very low here. But I can see here, so I've got framework, I've got .NET 7-zip. Now we can see other information about the applications, and we can also see a risk score. And you'll see here that you've got this red combined 7 out of 10. So basically, every application we find, we're going to try and match it with a known application. So this is all stuff found on your system. We have a research team that's about 40,000 applications researched at this point, and they have all of the dirt you can imagine on these companies. They find out who they're funded by, have they got any human rights violations, and not to too much of an extent, but they're going to tell you, they're going to troll their LinkedIn and say, is their CEO sitting in Moscow? And so in the case of 7-zip, we can see here that this is file management software. We can see details. It's used for compression. It can also be used to encrypt files, which is why it's got a higher risk. It's made in Russia. Do we believe 7-zip is doing anything bad? No. But
can it be used for malicious purposes? Very much so.
So a couple of things we can suggest on things like this is, hey, if you don't need this software, we can go in and block it. But we could also go in and ring fence it. And we're going to save them for another webinar. So if you do get stressed out and you say, well, 7-zip is Russian and it can reach out to the internet, we're scared, you could just go in and say, hey, I'm going to block its access to the internet. And it's very easy. But we'll get more into that afterwards because we've been learning for a few days, depending on when you deployed. but it's going to be quite complicated. Useful note: you can filter by categories here, and this is what I would start doing now. Remote. I thought it was called remote access software. Why can I not see remote access? Maybe I don't have any. You can only see what I've got. Yeah, obviously you can only see what you've got. So I'll say compression software. Did they rename everything? So, like I've got file management software, for example. I could also do things like
remote management, says Peter.
Remote management, is it?
There you go.
Okay, so I've got remote management software. Have I got any on here? So I've got AnyDesk on here. I've got TeamViewer on here. So when you start seeing things like this, maybe you want to take immediate action. Our goal is to not get you cancelled. If someone's working from home, we want to take this where people know what's going to happen. So if you're going to block TeamViewer, you say, well, why are you using TeamViewer? Why are you using AnyDesk? Let's go off and figure out how we can restrict this. So we can see here we got TeamViewer, we got AnyDesk. We can see the countries that developed, and we can also filter by countries. So if you've got any kind of requirement legally, so if I pick like China as a country, I could see here that I've got Cooper on there. Now this one's interesting because this will show you what permissions they request in the browser. So we can see here that they request access to your web data, to the internet, and to passwords in the browser. So not saying that these guys would do anything bad at all. Never seen the Chinese steal data. But you can see here that this is a coupon clipper made in China that has a lot of permissions. And we're going to start later on thinking about, do we really need this stuff on our machine? Is the risk worth the reward? And we're going to get back to applications later on. So if we can go on to the...
I do have a question that Elena has actually asked this twice. And now Elena is obviously extremely clever and a lady of impeccable tastes. What she's asked is, bumping up my question from 20 minutes ago, is it safe to assume the policy creation process, along with any other processes mentioned within the 100 Days webinars, would look the same for a Mac-only org? Can you include some Mac examples for some of the processes?
That means you need your Mac, right? Yes. So, yes and no. So mostly they're going to look the same. Some of them are different. I mean, the Mac works... fundamentally, it's a computer that has files. It has application files. We're going to see the same built-in apps here.
Well, I mean, storage is basically the same.
You didn't even finish that sentence. As soon as you said impeccable taste, I knew you were going to talk about Mac.
I know.
Storage is the same. So most of it's the same. And maybe we'll give Rob the opportunity to turn on a Mac for once. No, not
I've already got a Mac turned on, Danny.
Is that a Mac?
That is a Mac.
What are you doing?
He didn't even notice. See?
You tricked me. You got a black Mac.
I got a black Mac. Looks like a Surface.
Okay, that's cheating.
It looks like a Surface, but far prettier.
Okay, it worked this week anyway. Yes, so the answer is yes, and we'll get some examples for future webinars on the Mac as well. Okay, so let's move on.
Michael has asked, should I stop plugging in the drives I find in a parking lot?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Let's move forward because I know we're running very low on time.
13 minutes left.
Elevation policies. This is one I want to get through pretty quickly because we're going to run out of time. So we started logging information. So I'm going to show you my screen here, and I'm going to show you Unified Audit, and I'm also going to look at everything that elevated today. So we can see today that we tried to elevate a storage device. We were messing around on this machine. Yes, by the way, at 4:49 a.m. this morning, I was elevating Chrome on my machine.
I'm not even going to ask.
there was a story behind me elevating Chrome, and it was to make sure certificates are working on a new build that's going to improve. Okay, so here we see Chrome elevating. Obviously, not what you'd expect to see in a normal org that somebody's elevating Chrome. We can see that Windows Terminal elevated as well. We can see the machine. We can see if there's an elevation policy. So yes, there was a lot of testing going on last night. But this is going to show you everything that elevated in your environment across your devices. So I can see I elevated registry editor here. Really, really important because it means you know what you're about to block from your users. Now, sometimes users will try and elevate something or elevate something that doesn't need to be elevated, but you know what's elevating. So here's a trick here. We want to take away the user's admin rights. So a couple of things to do. The first thing we want to do is make sure nothing new can elevate. So to make sure existing apps continue to elevate, you can do one of two things. You can go into here. You can look at the policy that it matched. Oh, I clicked on the laptop, not the row. You can look at the policy that it matched, and you can see that this elevated not use it didn't elevate in assistance of ThreatLocker, so there's no policy. But I can see that this is registry editor. I can see that Chrome elevated, and I can see that Windows Terminal elevated. So what I could do is go into my applications here. I can look at registry if I've got a policy for registry editor, registry editing tools. If I wanted to allow the user to continue to elevate, I could click on here and I could edit this to automatically assist with elevation. This checkbox here allows the user to see a pop-up saying that this program was elevated to run as a local admin. The user doesn't need to be an admin anymore. Now, of course, registry editing tool seems a little bit dangerous, so you're not likely to do that. Also, this policy is at the entire org level, so we'd want to change this to it. If we were going to do this, we'd create a new policy and would create it at the computer level. So I think it was S. Oh, that computer got deleted. Whatever, I'll pick this machine here, hit continue, and I would actually set just this machine to elevate here. And we can also say, force the program to run as a standard user. This is a really useful trick because some programs request elevation permissions even if they don't need it.
Task manager.
Task manager. Well, that's not true because it's it needs it to see other users' tasks. So this is where you could just redirect it to run as a standard user. And if the program doesn't break, that's great because it means the user gets past the prompt. They're not being requested to put a password in. It's going to run as a standard user. This option here will literally say this program can now run as a local admin. And this here shows the user that, hey, we've just elevated this for you. This checkbox generally is a good idea to turn on, except when you're in the UK. So Cyber Essentials in the UK does not like you using elevation software if you've got an audit. Now, realistically...
Apparently they're cool with it now.
Oh, are they?
Yeah,
depends on the auditor.
Depends on how you describe it.
So the bottom line is we want to take away admin rights. We're not saying that any program should need to run as an admin, but it's better to run the program, one program as an admin than the entire system. So you can just check this box and it will allow this program to run. Let's just say you've got some really old garbage software that needs to run as a local admin. You can just go into here, find the app, change the policy, and allow it to run as an admin. Now, we're not going to go into too much now, but say 7-zip needed to run as an admin, we could go in, we could also ring fence it, and we'll talk more about ring fencing in the future. So, hey, this program can run as an admin, but I don't want it to be able to talk to any other program. So I'll go into here and say, restrict the application from interacting with other applications and only allow this list below. This is really useful because it means if I allow this, no one's going to be able to go and bounce to PowerShell from a file open window or something like that. So great features when you're elevating. Okay, the other thing from the administrative permissions we want to look at, last week we deployed, or we showed you a script and we also do it in the ThreatLocker agent, if I go into here, local admin's the last login. So I can see here, these local admins have never logged in on these machines. So if I wanted to, I could go out and say, if it's not logging in, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to permanently remove this admin from the administrators group. So it doesn't delete the user, it just takes their admin account from the admin group. I'm not going to ask you to put policies in place to do this automatically yet. That's something we want to do very, very carefully, but we do have the option to set policies to remove admins excluding others. But generally speaking, if you have admin accounts that are not being used, that's a good thing to get rid of. The other policy that I'd like you to put into place on these test machines and the test group this week is the password rotation policy. So you can do this through Laps in Microsoft Active Directory Laps. I think Intune has a solution for it too. There's various solutions, but you need something to automatically rotate your local admin password. So you can do that by going into Config Manager here, and you can add a policy. So I'm going to show you how to add it from the beginning. I've got one here, so I'm going to say new policy. Again, I can pick a group if I've just got a test group or an org. I'm going to say reset passwords, and we can set it to, oh, I've got to pick the policy type. Just type password here. And there's a whole bunch of systems here. ThreatLocker.
That's the one.
And basically here I can say, hey, I want to create a new password every 10 days. Or password length, let's make it longer than 15 characters long. And we're going to reset it every 14 days. And when I do that, it creates that policy. And I can see the password from the devices page here. So our users don't have weak local admin passwords on their machine. Two things we should probably be focusing on test group this week, but if we can turn a policy on for that group to reset their local admin passwords and just go manually remove the passwords on there as well.
Ian Dawson has asked, does ThreatLocker have a minimum license, and where do I find pricing so I can potentially fall off my chair?
The pricing is so the pricing is not going to make you fall off the chair. Well,
no.
If you're from Cav,
well, you could be amazed at how reasonable it is considering all of the protection it offers.
Yeah. So ThreatLockers typically we do have options for smaller companies, but typically works with 100 employee companies. So 100 endpoints, and the best way to get pricing is you just go to threatlocker.com and schedule a demo. You'll get to go through everything, you get to see all the features, and you get to talk to a salesperson, which will more than happily be able to give you a price. So this one was a bit of a disaster last week, so failure seems to be the theme. We put a policy in community to detect macros, and we did get feedback from customers that it was actually false positing detecting the use of macros in some cases when they enabled protected content. We did put another policy in which just looks at macro type documents, but the idea here was we want you to disable macros. If you don't think you use macros, it wouldn't be a bad idea to explain to the users that we're going to disable macros on the test group, see if there's any fallout on it. We are going to add a feature before the end of this 100 days that actually tells you if you've got macro-enabled documents properly on the endpoint by checking each document that's open, so you will be able to see that. But if you can go forward and disable macros for now, it's a good idea to do that. And like I said, there is a policy in detect in the community that lets you see the macro document types, which will give you an idea, but it is still causing false positives because it includes a .doc in there for the older document types. Monitor SMB version 1. So this is a new policy we apparently added into community today, into configuration manager today. We want to be able to disable SMB version 1, and let me just check if it's in there. If it's not, I asked it to go live. SMB version 1 auditing. So this is the ultimate policy we want to put on. Configure SMB version 1. We want to set this to enable, to disable it. I think when enabled, it disables the policy, and this will disable it. We don't want you to break your scanners and your printers. So what we want you to do is to, for now, not turn this policy on, but turn this policy on, which will now enforce the auditing of SMB version 1. So basically, this sets a policy that says audit the use of SMB version 1. When you turn this on, if someone connects to an SMB version 1 share, it's going to log event 3000 in the event log. So you turn that policy on, and then you could go into detect. We're going to put these in community, and we'll send an email afterwards as well. But you can go into detect, and you can go in and create a policy to monitor for SMB v1 usage. So you can go in and create an alert on that event log ID.
Glenn has made a suggestion, which is not a bad one, which is please include TLAP's password history like LAPS does. That was a bit of a mouthful. Basically, he wants password history with TLAPS because apparently LAPS does that.
To see what the previous passwords were.
I'm not sure what the usefulness of that will be, but apparently LAPS does.
We will pass it on. Okay, so if we can go forward to the next slide.
Should we show people where they find the passwords, by the way, for TLAPS?
Yes, I should very quickly show you that. Devices. So if you go into devices page, if I got one, and basically you click on this and it will show you the last password that it changed.
People have asked questions about this one has actually come up before. Is there an integration with IT Glue for rotated credentials? It's been requested before.
I don't know if our integration supports that, so is the answer. So potentially, if not, we could put it as a request. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about, we're going to run out of time. Actually, we are out of time, but I want to turn BitLocker on your service. Test service first at this point, but this is really important. If an attacker gets onto your server, so let's just say you've got a Hyper-V server and you've got an Active Directory domain controller on it as a physical server. So they get onto your server, and they should never be able to do that if we set our network properly, but let's just say they RDP onto your physical box. Well, they open up your Active Directory server, and they try and run ransomware, and it's blocked because you're blocking untrusted software. They try and delete files, and there's a policy to automatically stop it. And the security software is really starting to annoy them. They have two options. They can now mount the virtual hard drive directly, rip out the security software, and boot the virtual machine. Or they could mount it and just copy the files directly from it like a portable disk. If you turn BitLocker on your server, it makes it very, very hard for attackers to do this. So you need a recovery key. You can't reboot into safe mode very easily. It's a good idea to put this on your servers. Again, use test servers first. We have it on all our servers. Doesn't seem to cause any major issues, but always test it first, especially in production environments. It's pretty quick to turn on, and just a Windows policy. You don't do that in ThreatLocker. You can just do it in Windows. The only other thing I'd ask you to do is review high risk applications. We've already done administrative rights. So the next thing is high risk applications. If you go into the portal and you click on the health center, we kind of went over this. There's a PDF you can download. This is going to show you all of the software my USB drive is now trying to access that's running on your machine and all of your configurations. You're going to have hundreds and hundreds of applications here with data on them, and you're going to stress out when you see this. But the most important thing is we've put 6 applications which we think you should take priority on. And in my case, I've got KeePass. I don't know why. It's high. 7-Zip, LibreOffice. I don't have too many high risk. Putty, Nmap, obviously a bad one, and MSDT. So these are things that you should pay attention to first, either block or ring fence, but at least know they're happening in your environment so we can watch them all for next week.
Now, we have lots of questions about the encrypting VMs. So Glenn has asked, turning on BitLocker on servers in Azure is problematic. There's no console to be able to type in a key at boot up.
Okay, so in Azure, it's different because obviously I'm more concerned when you have a physical server. And I would be really...
And follow-up question to that is, Christopher, should you turn on BitLocker on both physical and virtual servers?
Yes.
Anonymous attendee, Danny question, ThreatLocker doesn't maintain the keys, right? And that's our job?
That is correct. We do not maintain the keys. Azure does it quite well. We have it on all of our laptops. And
I think I've answered their second question, which is, do you BitLocker the hypervisor or the local disks in the guest VMs?
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. We are out of time. So the homework for the next week is all of the stuff we've just done. We're going to summarize it. So we've got turning on USB policies. And we're going to send it out in an email as well because I'm already forgetting what it was. We've got removing the admin accounts that are not used, putting a password policy on. Again, if we can stick to the test group or a smaller group of users, make sure everything's running smoothly for the admin passwords. Reviewing your applications a little bit early for this. Reviewing what USB traffic's been used before you create a USB policy. Turning on monitoring for SMB version 1. Turning on BitLocker where you can on your test groups, and the rest of the stuff is reviewing network traffic. So if we can review in the unified audit for 3389 traffic is a really good start, so we can get ahead of it next week.
I don't know who anonymous attendee is referring to here, but they said, love the haircut, bro.
Not yours.
Fair.
I think that wraps us up. Next week, we're going to be looking deeper into the applications. We're doing simulations about what might be denied. We're going to be working on further elevation policies and further network policies. So we look forward to seeing you next week, and a bunch of other tips as well. Again, if you look out for the next webinar at threatlocker.com/100 days. If you wanted to see a demo of ThreatLocker or do a free trial, or if you are a customer and you want to see some of the new stuff, go to your account manager or just go to threatlocker.com and schedule a new demo, and they'll find your account manager and make sure they're on it if you don't know who they are. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and thank you, Rob, again.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, everyone.